So the Pistons are stuck in the middle, and it doesn't look like they're getting out anytime soon. With Blake Griffin being traded from the Clippers to the Pistons on January 9th of 2018, it seemed as if the Pistons were heading in a different direction, but they have just ended up staying in the same place essentially, being a borderline playoff team or not even making the playoffs at all. It's time for a trade. Blake Griffin is in his 30s now, and he needs to play for a contender while he can still contribute. So let's go over 5 potential trades for Blake Griffin, starting off with number 5, the Utah Jazz. Mike Conley hasn't worked out so far. They are 15-11 so far into the season, and although this is mostly attributed to their horrible bench, Mike Conley has not lived up to his days in Memphis and is currently shooting 36.9% from the field. He's struggled with a nagging hamstring injury, however, if the Jazz feel like Conley's time is up, they can definitely pull a trade for Blake Griffin, who is without a doubt the better player. The trade that would most likely go down is Blake Griffin and Reggie Jackson for Mike Conley, Dante Exum, their 2020 first round protected pick, and their 2022 second round pick. If the Jazz were to trade both Mike Conley and Dante Exum, they would definitely need another point guard in return, and Reggie Jackson, although not amazing, has proven to be a more than serviceable starting point guard in his seasons with Detroit. Dante Exum is mostly in there to make the trade work because of Blake's huge contract, and the 2020 protected pick is simply because Memphis owns the rights to the pick if it falls in the 8 to 14 range, which most likely won't happen. Detroit will then theoretically own the pick if it falls in the top 7 or outside the lottery. Although no one exactly knows who or what Detroit will want in return for Blake Griffin, it would be mostly beneficial for them to either get picks or extremely young players, thus why most of these trades will contain picks. Anyhow, with this trade the Jazz would, on paper, immediately become contenders. Deja vu, and would have a starting lineup of Rudy Gobert, Blake Griffin, Bojan Bogdanovic, Donovan Mitchell, and Reggie Jackson, with Joe Ingles and Royce O'Neal coming off the bench. Not only would this trade add more star power for them, but it would also increase their ever-lacking depth off the bench. Number 4, the Boston Celtics. There have been rumors flying around about Blake Griffin leaving Detroit for Boston for a couple of years now. This trade would make that a reality. Boston has outplayed their expectations so far this season, being one of the best teams in the East, and although most likely they won't want to make any changes, maybe they would want to pull a trade for Blake Griffin. In this case, the trade would be Blake Griffin, Bruce Brown, and a 2022 lottery-protected first-round pick for Gordon Hayward and Romeo Langford. This trade seems reasonably straight up. The Celtics would get a good big man, which, for the most part, they don't exactly have, and an alright rotation player in Bruce Brown to potentially refill Hayward on the wing. While Hayward was playing, he was playing excellent, averaging 17.5 points on tremendous efficiency, while also leading the starters in offensive rating. However, he has only played 11 games. Blake Griffin isn't any better injury-wise, however, when healthy, Blake is the better player, and maybe the Celtics are willing to take that risk. They also get that protected pick from Detroit, which, if by some miracle the Pistons make the playoffs, they would get it. On Detroit's end, they would get a 20-year-old shooting guard who is very raw to work on and potentially build up into a star, and obviously get Gordon Hayward, who A, has a shorter contract, and B, they can trade him once enough days have gone by for even more assets. For the Celtics, this would give them multiple options for lineups, but would most likely be a lineup of Daniel Tice, Blake Griffin, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kemba Walker, with Marcus Smart as the 6th man. Another option would obviously be to put Blake at the 5 and insert Smart at the 2, but not sure how well defensively that would work, so most likely it would be the 1st. This will also give the Pistons the option to keep being a mediocre team, which, at this point, wouldn't really be a surprise, or to rebuild with trading Hayward again. On to trade number 3. The Dallas Mavericks. With the era of big threes, the Mavericks might want a 3rd star to put beside Luka and Kristaps, and what better player than Blake Griffin? He would give this team plenty of shooting and also take a lot of the shot creating load off Luka and allow him to play a bit more off the ball, which in a lot of case scenarios could be beneficial. Obviously, Porzingis would then play at the 5, which he has no problem doing, and Dwight Powell would then become the 6th man. As far as what the return would be, they would have to send both Tim Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee to Detroit, along with their 2020 first round pick and their 2021 and 2022 second round picks. Along with Blake Griffin, they would receive, him, who is a good shooter and can provide spacing for the big 3. In return, the Pistons will get bad short-term contracts along with a first round pick and 2 seconds. Obviously, 2 first-round picks would be more beneficial for the Pistons, but I don't know if the Mavericks would be willing to do that, especially with Blake Griffin's huge contract being a long-term risk. Trade number 2, the Miami Heat. The Heat are another team far outweighing expectations. Before Jimmy Butler signed with the team, they were essentially a bunch of above average role players who go out there and play hard. With Butler, Nunn and Hero joining as well as their previous young players improving, it has made the team infinitely better. Now, although this depth is beyond amazing, you need more than one star to get you far in the playoffs. So for this trade, the Pistons would send Blake Griffin and Markieff Morris to the Heat for Kelly Olynyk, James Johnson, Dion Waiters, a 2020 unprotected first round pick, their 2022 lottery protected first round pick, and their 2025 second round pick. Kelly Olynyk is a decent center who is actually more of a power forward if you ask me, and Dion Waiters and James Johnson are both bad short-term contracts just like the last trade. Neither of them actually get minutes on Miami right now, so Miami is essentially just giving up Kelly 2 picks and a potential pick for Blake Griffin and Markieff Morris, who is a good role player and shooter. Finally, trade number 1, the Portland Trailblazers. So this one's a 3-team trade. The Trailblazers are struggling, and so are the Spurs, so this is the perfect trade. So for the Pistons part, they would send Blake Griffin to the Portland Trailblazers. For the Spurs part, they would send DeMarre Carroll to the Trailblazers, who's been extremely disappointing for them, and would give Portland a much needed small forward, and also the 2020 second round pick to Detroit. Finally, for the Trailblazers, they would send Kent Bazemore to the Pistons along with their 2020 first round pick and 2021 first round pick, and then send Rodney Hood and Zach Collins to the Spurs. For the Portland Trailblazers, they would obviously get Blake Griffin, who would create a new big 3 in the West until Jusuf Nurkic comes back from injury, and Blake would provide a much needed big man and add a lot of scoring and shooting into the rotation. Currently their only, and yes I mean only, serviceable big man is Hassan Whiteside, and he is nothing close to what he was in his prime, and there have still been rumors of him being high maintenance off the court. Also, you know it's bad when Mario Hezonja is playing 83% of his time at the power forward position. While Hassan Whiteside is putting up 16.2 points per game, 12.4 rebounds per game, 1.4 assists per game, 0.4 steals per game, 2.4 blocks per game, and has a 62 efficient field goal percentage, we don't know if a lot of those stats are accentuated because of the lack of front court talent on the Blazers. Nevertheless, this isn't a rant on Hassan Whiteside. The fact of the matter is, we don't know how good he really is yet, but adding Blake Griffin to the team could help show if Whiteside has a winning mentality or not. Currently, the Trailblazers are 10-16, and Carmelo isn't the answer. This team needs a third star, and Blake can provide that. For the San Antonio Spurs part, something desperately needs to change. Although the change should most likely happen with one or both of their stars, this can be a good start for them. First of all, like I mentioned, DeMarre Carroll is playing like straight cheeks. In his 11 games played, he hasn't even played 11 minutes per game, and he is 33, however his career isn't quite at that point in my opinion. They would also send a second round pick to Detroit, which isn't too valuable unless they really feel like they've found Manu Ginobili 2.0. In return, the Spurs would get Zach Collins, who, although injured, has been one of Portland's better players and is only 22, so if the Spurs want to go into rebuild mode, which does seem unlikely, he can be a rebuilding piece. They would also get Rodney Hood, who although had an amazing start to the season, he did tear his left Achilles, so he's in there for salary relief more than anything. For the Detroit Pistons, they would receive Kent Bazemore and DeMarre Carroll, who are both essentially useless to Detroit if they want to rebuild. However, they are getting 2 first round picks from Portland and a second rounder from San Antonio. 2 first round picks is a lot to give on Portland's end for such a huge contract. However, one of those could turn into a second rounder or something if Detroit agrees. But back to Portland for a second, if they did decide on doing this trade, they would immediately have a lineup, disregarding injuries, of Jusuf Nurkic, Blake Griffin, Carmelo Anthony, CJ McCollum, and Damian Lillard, with Hassan Whiteside coming off the bench. Alright, so these are 5 trades I think would be beneficial for both sides, and especially for Blake Griffin. I want him to go to a contender. I think he's a really good player, and although he has struggled with injuries, he has definitely kept his career going super well. So let me know down in the comments where you think he will go and where you think he should go. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see you buddies in the next one.